Coming up on the Bill Gephardt Show.
All right, look who we've got now joining us. John Huntsman. Welcome, Angela. It's good to see you.
I was going to go hide in the corner, but talking to you, I've decided to continue participating.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Bill Gephardt Show.
Coming up on the Bill Gephardt Show.
The social fabric is being strained to the point of breaking, and it worries me.
U.S. Senator Mike Lee, direct from Washington exclusively. Can the Postal Service deliver on mail-in voting? And what's he think about the GOP convention? And what must Trump do to beat Joe Biden?
It is protect and serve, not comply or die. Police are not judge, jury, and executioner.
Her name is Lex Scott. She's the founder of Black Lives Matter Utah. She's tough. She's brash. She won't condone violence. And she says Mike Brown is the best police chief in the nation. What she says it will take to end the protests.
Local newspapers, small news organizations across the country have really been struggling.
She was editor-in-chief of the Slc Tribune. Coming up, Jennifer Napier-Pearce on the state of local news, fake news, and where we go from here. Plus, a larger-than-life celebration of influential and inspirational Utah women. I'll talk with the project's manager, famed pop artist Jann Haworth exclusively. 7 stories tall and absolutely fab. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. As you can see, we have a jammed-packed show today, brought to you by our sponsors, supporters of local journalism. I hope you will support them, including
Dream Dental Implants at Dr. Brian Hendricks, home of the revolutionary 4-on-4 implant. I spent a day watching Dr. Hendricks and his team while they performed this procedure, and I was amazed by what I saw. Dream Dental Implants in downtown Salt Lake City. Also, ES Solar Utah. I have gone solar in my home, and it really is a no down payment situation with no out of pocket. It is safe, it is clean, it's efficient, and now I personally pay less for my home's electricity every month. One Wire Fiber, where Adam Sessions and his team delivers cutting-edge phone and communications products and services to businesses across Utah and across the West, with the goal of doing it better than anyone else and doing it affordably. And All Utah Plumbing, Heating, and Air, where owner-operator John Holland and his ever-growing team of professionals are ready to show you how to do your own plumbing, heating, and air conditioning.
Okay, I want to welcome to the podcast now the guy you see on TV, the guy's face that you recognize. It's Senator Mike Lee from Washington. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Doing great, thank you.
You know what, you're a student of history, and so I kind of want to get your feeling on, are you comfortable or uncomfortable with the way the country is going, either way? Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'd say a little uncomfortable.
Okay.
I remember studying 1968 in school and concluding that just about everything that could go wrong in 1968 did.
Yes.
2020 sometimes feels a little bit like that. The social fabric is being strained to the point of breaking, and it worries me.
And by that social fabric, you mean the division, us versus them?
Yeah, a lot of us versus them, a lot of otherization in our interpersonal discourse. All of this coming about more or less contemporaneously with the coronavirus.
Okay.
And that makes things harder.
Yeah.
People feel additional pressure related to work, related to
All right. Speaking of that, there's a lot of anger out there. So I want to talk to you about a fellow who had a moderating voice in the days immediately following George Floyd's death. And that fellow would be you. You offered a statement on the floor of the Senate about a protest held in Ogden where demonstrators led by a man named Malik Dio thanked police for protecting them as they demonstrated and exercised their First Amendment right. They also offered their condolences for a recently slain Ogden police officer. You, in turn, said you thanked Mr. Dio for his leadership, and then you said that the loss of that police officer and the loss of George Floyd is a loss for all of us. What the people of Ogden did this weekend is an example for all of us, a reason for hope. That's what you said. Since then, you've met with the founder of Black Lives Matter Utah, Lex Scott. You even made a joint appearance with her on Fox TV. What did you come away with after meeting Malik and Lexi?
Yeah, I met with both Malik and Lexi, had a really good, productive conversation with both of them. Both of them have ideas about how we can make our communities, our state, and our country safe, and at the same time do so without compromising civil liberties, civil rights, and increasing and inflaming needlessly racial tensions.
That's what you talked about. What'd you come away with? What's your inspiration, if any, now?
Okay, so it depends on what you mean by what did I come away with.
That's right.
If you're asking my impressions of them, they're both really thoughtful. One of the impressions I had as a result of the meeting was that the Black Lives Matter entity in Utah that goes by that name in Utah is different than what I've seen in other parts of the country,
okay,
where there's a much more inflammatory rhetoric, where there's a lot more that's being done, I feel, within the organization in Utah. The organization in Utah came about spontaneously. It wasn't part of any national organization. It came into existence. And my meeting with them was very productive.
Okay.
Good ideas.
I'm not sure where it will go, and apparently you're not sure exactly yet either.
Well, a few weeks ago, we brought to the Senate floor a bill introduced by Senator Tim Scott. There was no one on either side of the aisle that believed that that represented the end point for the debate. We wanted to bring it up on the floor, debate it, amend it, discuss it, and come up with some additional remedies. In this meeting, we talked, for example, about the need to update, modernize, reform, and codify qualified immunity standards. One of many things that I think ought to be done and that could help ease uncertainty and reduce tension in this area.
All right. We're talking to Senator Mike Lee, Utah's Senator Mike Lee. Let me talk about the election a little bit and the fear of President Trump that mail-in voting is going to lead to a certain amount of corruption and on and on. In the meantime, his Postmaster General has done some things which I think have hurt the brand of the post office. If I were going to mail, I just came back from the post office with a passport application for myself, and I just came back and if you're going to mail a package across the country to grandma, would you choose the post office now, or would you maybe go with FedEx or UPS or DHL or something? They worry about there's funding is there, they got the funding, but they worry about the brand. Do you share that worry?
Look, I don't think that there's anything about the U.S. Postal Service that presents a threat to the election. The Postal Service itself is a carrier. And I also don't think there's anything about the Postal Service right now that is going to cause people to wonder whether their parcel, whether their envelope, or their package is going to arrive. There are many parts of the world where national postal system can't necessarily be trusted to get things.
No, and our postal system is great, and that's the point. Are we kind of ruining or the beginnings of ruining a great postal system that, the founders are the ones that established it? It's even written about in the Constitution, and that's my worry.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think we're anywhere near any of the outcomes that you described. I think we've got to make sure that it's sustainable, that they're following good policies and established practices. I'm not worried about the U.S. postal system crumbling right now because of a lack of legitimacy. I do worry sometimes about their making sure that they're adequately funded. The current director has done a good job of getting them to a better, more sustainable path financially, and I think that's a good thing.
Okay, I worry about the machines that have been taken out, the sorting machines, without being replaced, and there's no intention to replace them. Some of them have been largely destroyed, and those things were designed to be more efficient, not less efficient, wouldn't you say?
Look, I don't know enough about the postal system in order to be able to comment meaningfully on the way of any of these particular decisions right now. But I do trust that they have got reasons for taking the steps that they have, and hope that they will continue to do so.
You know, I watched a great deal of and I'm still watching it because it's still going on, the Republican convention, and I have not heard, as I have heard in previous conventions, I have not heard policy or platform statements. Is there going to be a policy or platform statement about what we'll do?
Yeah. So every convention, every 4-year interval brings about a convention. At least on the Republican side, that's when we have our convention. National delegates chosen to it. 4 years ago, my wife and I both served on the platform committee.
Yeah.
For the Republican convention, and
you had policies, you had ideas, and this is where we're going to go. And if you elect us, this is what we're going to do.
Right.
You know, I have not heard that this time. Not even heard what we're going to do about a wall.
Right.
The famous wall.
I'm sorry, I misspoke a moment ago. My wife and I were put on the rules committee, not the platform committee. There is also a platform committee that meets at the same time. My friend Boyd Matheson was on that. But yeah, this time around they didn't have those, and you know the committees will typically show up a week or two early to the convention so that they can debate and discuss these things. Because of the coronavirus, they made the decision this year not to do that, and they instead just adopted a blanket statement. I think it was partially re-upping past platform statements and then saying,
I don't think so. I don't think there was even any of that. And of course, they could have done it by the phone. I just worry that we have no particular laid out path for what if you elect Republicans, if you elect this president, this is what we're going to do.
Bill, that's just not correct. You've been misinformed on that front.
Correct me where I'm wrong, because they could have met on the phone. Correct me where I'm wrong, Mike.
Yeah, it's because of the coronavirus risk that they decided not to do this. It's not because there was any decision made that we're just not going to adopt a platform, because we don't need one. We re-upped the platform as adopted by the Republican National Committee in 2016 in Cleveland.
Okay. You're a conservative Republican. I am certainly not a liberal. But I'm not sure I totally recognize the Republican Party anymore the way it has gone. Do you know what I'm talking about, or would you like me to articulate?
Yeah, good. Continue the thought.
Balanced budget, smaller government, free trade, NATO, pushback on Soviet aggression, and this is not something that would normally be in a Republican thing, but some of the outrages are the paying a bounty to kill Americans to some governments. I am used to my Republican Party speaking out on these things, and I don't know where they've gone, and I'm not sure I recognize it. Do you? And tell me where I'm wrong again.
Sometimes I don't. Look, it has been a source of great concern to me that over the nearly 10 years that I've been in the United States Senate, I have never ceased talking about the need for a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, making it more difficult for Congress to pay forward the bill by sending it to future generations. It's too easy for Congress to do that right now. The incentives are not in place so as to disincentivize that kind of conduct on the part of Congress. It has worried me that since Republicans took control of the Senate following the 2014 election and kept the Senate in the 2016 election, and also picked up the White House and have the House, we still engaged in massive profligate deficit spending.
Yes.
It's troubling to me that this year we've added to the deficit by trillions.
We could, excuse the coronavirus a little bit for that, but you're right. There was deficit spending before that.
Right. Even before COVID-19, we were running $1 trillion deficit. That's inexcusable for any political party. It is particularly so for the Republican Party, which has campaigned for years against that sort of thing. So yeah, that is very concerning. You also raised the point about trade. Republicans have long prided themselves on wanting a government, a federal government that facilitates rather than discourages free trade. We've been moving in a different direction during this administration. That has been a source of concern to me. It's one of the reasons why, even before the presidential election of 2016, in an effort to try to figure out how our trade laws had gotten so messed up, I did some research into how it was that Congress went about forfeiting as much of its power to regulate trade internationally as it has. Its power to impose tariffs and import restrictions of other kinds. And what I discovered is that going back to the late 1920s, Congress has, in different pieces, handed over to various executive branch officials. Sometimes it's to the president, sometimes it's to somebody working underneath the president in the executive branch, in different areas, all of this trade authority. And Congress has done that so as to insulate itself from the accountability that attaches to that. That's wrong, and it's one of the reasons why I introduced something called the Global Trade Accountability Act, which would require that anytime one of these provisions authorizing the executive branch is invoked so as to increase a trade barrier or a tariff, Congress has to approve it, and then the president has to sign that approval into law. That's another area where I sometimes think that the current Republican Party doesn't necessarily reflect where I am or where I think the party has been in the past.
And it is politics, so you're not the only one that gets a vote. I understand that, but I'm interested in your remarks here.
Yeah, it's a concern, but I have been shy about sharing that concern, not before this administration and not during this administration. I haven't been shy about raising it with the president himself and sharing it with my colleagues. I am one senator, but I make my views known.
All right, let's put it this way. Let's try to do it a different way. What is the best path forward for Trump's reelection with all the background we've talked about so far?
Yep.
Let's put it that way.
I think his best path forward is to stay focused on some of the same things that made him popular to begin with and helped him get elected in 2016, and some of the same things that have brought him success up to this point, at least up until the moment COVID-19 hit, during his presidential administration, meaning working to drain the swamp, working to diminish the size, scope, cost, and reach of the federal government, particularly at administrative, bureaucratic regulations imposed by the federal government, regulations that in the aggregate impose an economic cost on our economy that's measured in the roughly $2 trillion a year range.
All right.
And those are costs that are borne disproportionately by poor and middle class Americans. The consumers that you've devoted your career to looking out for. We have this misconception sometimes that federal regulations and the cost of complying with them is just borne by big corporate fat cats, the sort of people depicted on a Monopoly game piece. But that's not the case. But American consumers pay for those through higher prices on goods and services, everything they buy, and diminished wages, unemployment, and underemployment, everything they earn. I think the president ought to focus on that, on draining the swamp, on limiting the extent to which the federal government has power over their day-to-day lives.
When we talk about draining the swamp, we're not talking, I'm worried about all the people around the president who have been indicted or jailed or investigated, but that's not the swamp we're talking about, is it? Or is it?
Look, I don't know what sense in which you raise the term. I use the term to refer to the aggressive growth of the federal government as a whole that's taken place over time.
Okay.
And including and especially those who are embedded within the government who don't change from one administration to another. Look, the top level political appointees in any administration change. Yeah, they can bring about significant change while they're in there, but they are only as, the most they're ever going to keep their job is 8 years. And they're never more than 4 years away from being fired.
Okay.
Any one of them can be fired at any moment. Those that I refer to, typically when I refer to the swamp, are those who are there for decades at a time, who have been given immense authority because of lazy lawmaking on the part of Congress, and who are basically accountable to no one, who is in turn accountable to the people.
Is that the deep swamp? Not deep swamp. Is that the deep state that we've heard you talk about from time to time? That there's some sort of a gang of, I don't know who, behind the scenes who are working against the president or against something or other?
Yeah, I'm not referring to any particular group of people. I'm referring to the dynamic.
Okay.
Part of the swamp also entails not just people within government, but people who are part of the sort of, if it were Pentagon related, I'd call it the military-industrial complex.
Okay.
When it's outside the Pentagon, I'll sometimes call it the administrative industrial complex, or K Street. K Street is part of Washington where there are a lot of lobbying firms and a lot of lobbyists. There's a lot of influence in corporate America in Washington, and there's sort of this weird symbiotic relationship that sometimes perpetuates big government. And it's not necessarily about red versus blue or Democrat versus Republican.
Yeah.
It's sometimes about Washington, D.C. versus everybody else, and I don't like that.
Now it's getting worse and worse. Okay. Would you, we're almost done here, but I think, as far as time is concerned, but would you talk me off the ledge about something that has been bugging me that I've been hearing about on all kinds of different, cable shows? And that's Q-Anon. It's this conspiracy theory of some sort that has to do with pedophilia, and it had to do with Hillary's alleged basement brothel for little children, and it's Satan involved, and the president is not saying anything bad about them. It's just, it worries me, this conspiracy thing. What about you? Can you talk me off the ledge on this?
Yeah. Bill, I wish I could offer more insight on this. I know very, very little about QAnon. I don't entirely understand what the theory even is about the organization. I certainly know nothing about the existence of such a cabal. So I wish I could.
Well, they got those little cues. They got their flags. They run around the White House and protest meetings. They got those cues, and I don't know much about them either. I just keep hearing about this stuff. Yeah.
You've been to Washington lately?
No, I have not.
If you spend any time around Washington, around parts of town, including around the Capitol, you're going to see some interesting folks who have some interesting theories.
Yes, you will. And the QAnon one is getting all of this publicity, and I'm going, is this something I even need to be thinking about? And it was raised before the president. He said the same thing as you. He doesn't know anything about them. I mean, it's all the way down to cannibalizing children, and don't forget about all the Hollywood movie stars that are involved in this. This is something I shouldn't even worry about. Is that kind of what you're telling me?
Well, I tend to focus my worry on things that I know about and that I can understand. I neither know about this nor have the ability to process the information about it. I haven't heard any credible source of information confirming that it exists.
Yeah.
There are things that I know about that I know are true that I have to worry about. I'm going to focus on those things for now.
Yes, that's right. Well, Mike, this is great. I did hear the president say that the only way we're going to lose this election if the election is rigged. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I just don't agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a good strategy, but I also just disagree with it as a factual matter.
All right.
I think American people have a choice to make, and I think they're going to make that choice.
Senator Mike Lee, it has really been a pleasure. I'm so glad you took the time from the office there in Washington to chat with us for a little. I know where to find you, and I'm going to come back if it's all right with you and put you on this podcast some more.
Please do.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks. Have a good day. All right, let's welcome to the podcast now John Holland. He is the owner and the founder of All Utah Plumbing, Heating, and Air. And John, the last time we talked to you, we were talking about, in the middle of all this COVID stuff, business is going well, apparently so well that you've got a new truck, you've opened a new building, and you're actually hiring. I'm interested in that hiring thing. What is it you're looking for as an HVAC and plumbing and electrical guy? What are you looking for when you want to hire somebody?
Yeah, good morning, Bill. Yes, that's right. We've been moving right along. And so Yeah, we're looking for an HVAC technician, someone with at least 5 years experience, has some humor involved because, as you know me, I like to joke around.
Oh yes.
Well,
Oh yes.
but loving to work hard,
Uh-huh.
knowledge, and then really, really cares about the quality of the work. And then lastly, wants to be absolutely honest with the customer and to themselves. That would be a nice beginning of what we're really looking for.
Okay. And what you're doing now, you're still doing all of the plumbing, heating, air conditioning, new installs, take out, tear down, haul the old stuff away. But you're doing a lot of remodeling now. That's kind of a little bit of a switch for you, isn't it?
No, we've
Okay.
been doing remodeling since the beginning. And so, yeah, we do a lot of bathroom remodeling, a lot of kitchen remodeling. Right now, it's back to back as we're scheduling. Just go to the next one, go to the next one. So, yeah, we really do we do it the kind of the old school way. So I've got an in-house tile guy that literally we set the tile. We don't sub any of our stuff out. And the only thing that brings somebody in, I've had a very long relationship with them, is our electrical. So
Okay.
if we need to run wiring, we bring him in, we get it done. But yeah, we'll gut the thing if needed and then redo the whole bathroom, or maybe it's the whole kitchen, get your outlets where you want them, just really set it up nice. Even spice racks like in the kitchen and stuff. It's really fun.
All right. So
awesome.
do you do your own designing? Do you do the design, or do you have somebody design it, or how's that work?
Yep. So we do on a bathroom. It's a little bit simpler. We do most of the design just in-house, just through communication and everything. On kitchens, it's communication again. It's all about listening to your client. And so find out all their wants, their desires, all those things. Then we actually go to the cabinet place where we're going to actually pick out what it's going to look like. And then it all gets put on the computer, laid out. There's the design. Do you like that? Hey, you want to change this cabinet out? Things like that. And we work with them. So, yeah, it's from design to full concierge. We go pick out the tile, all those things together with our client, like your countertops,
Yeah.
granite quartz, whatever it might be. We go pick that out together. And the clients love that because we're shopping together and we nail these things down.
All right, finally, your guys have been out to my house to fool with my air conditioning and some other stuff. You're still doing that, though. It's not all remodeling. You'll still come out and do my stuff?
Yep, we're a full-service plumbing, heating, and air company with remodeling as well, and fully licensed. I'm licensed to do every ounce of that this company is.
Now, I reach you how?
So the best way to reach us, reach out at All Utah Plumbing, Heating, and Air. You can message us from there, send us your info, and you can also give us a call at 801-652-4755. We're available 24 hours a day.
Okay, and the website is allutahplumbingheatingandair.com.
It's
right?
allutahplumbing.com.
Oh, allutahplumbing.com. Got it.
Yep.
All right, John. Thanks. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Let's welcome to the podcast now Lex Scott. She is the founder of Black Lives Matter Utah. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You know, I think many of us are familiar with Black Lives Matter, at least from a national standpoint. So I want to find out a little bit about your background. What informs you to be an activist? Where do you come from, and what informs what you think?
Well, I was born in Denver, Colorado, and my mother moved me here when I was 1 year old. And I grew up in Holiday and East Mill Creek.
Okay.
And I feel like I've been an activist my entire life. And so, you know, I experienced a lot of racism, a lot of bullying in my youth. And I grew up and I just decided that other Black children should not have to experience this, and Black people in Utah in general. And so I like to be one of the voices for the voiceless, and I like to fight injustice.
Okay. It seems to me that we've been going through this racism and this injustice and this police stuff for a long, long time. I was a reporter in Los Angeles, when the riots broke out down there, lost a couple of teeth in them. No hard feelings, really, none whatsoever. I understand the anger. But now it seems to be George Floyd, this formerly anonymous fellow who was brutally murdered, in my view. And now this is all started up again coast to coast. Is this something that is just brewing and then building up, or what?
Well, throughout history, race riots have been started because of police brutality and racism. There have been race riots in the early 1900s because of police brutality. And so, and the sad thing is that, U.S. police kill over 1,000 people per year, more than any other developed country on earth. But it's only the cases where we have the footage of them killing someone that really cause an uproar, because I've been protesting in this movement for 7 years. I protested twice in Ferguson, once in Minneapolis. I just got back from Portland protesting. And, we have screamed out for 7 years about police brutality victims, and we've been ignored. And so I think the film was what outraged people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the latest film we've got out of the best I can remember is that police dog that was attacking that fellow who was completely surrendering, and now he might actually lose a leg over all of this. And the only reason the footage came forward was because he sued, and his lawyers got that footage and released it. They say for a public good. But yes, you're right about the videos. These are what do it.
Exactly. And there's so many people that don't get a hashtag, that don't get a protest, that don't get a viral video. And so basically at Black Lives Matter Utah, what we're pushing for is police accountability and transparency.
I would have them watch out for each other. Really, no one wants to defund the police. We have to have some security of some sort in our society. What are your feelings on all of this?
So at Black Lives Matter Utah, we're pushing for accountability and transparency. We don't believe that there is such thing as a good police officer or a bad police officer. We believe that all police officers need checks and balances in place that will hold them accountable for their actions and hold them to a higher standard. So the things we're pushing for are data collection, because when Black and brown people say, hey, we are 2% of the population in Utah, we're being pulled over at 11 times the rate of white people, people say, that's not happening. So we want the police to track the race and ethnicity of every person that they're stopping, pulling over, and arresting, so that we have that data collection to prove that we're being profiled. And once we've established which police departments are doing the most profiling, we can address that issue. We want body cam footage legislation. And basically what that means is every time there's a critical incident, like an officer involved shooting, we want that body cam footage released to the public within 10 days of every officer involved shooting, unedited with sound, because we pay for that footage. We pay for the body cams out of our taxpayer dollars.
Yes.
So we want that footage. We want independent, democratically elected civilian review boards that have the power to investigate and fire police and bring charges against police. The current system, when there's an officer involved shooting in Provo, then Saratoga Springs police will come in and investigate them and find them innocent. My light just died.
That's all right.
And
that's all right. I still see you.
And then if there's an incident in Saratoga Springs, 3 months later, Provo police will come in and investigate them. We believe that is a conflict of interest, and we are pushing for independent civilian oversight. Also, qualified immunity reform. If a police officer sues you and disables you permanently, like Jamal Bell in Ogden, who was shot over 11 times, we want to be able to file a lawsuit against that police department or that police officer. We want de-escalation training, diversity training, implicit bias training. And another thing we push for are less than lethal weapons in police cars, like rubber bullet guns.
Well, you've already been successful at that. I mean, I suppose there's lots of lethal stuff in the police cars, but I mean, we're into stun guns and rubber bullets, and none of them feel good, I might add. But yeah, there's always been some progress.
Well, there's been progress due to our work with Black Lives Matter and the community activist group. We've gotten Salt Lake Police to take lethal shotguns out of Salt Lake police cars and replace them with less than lethal rubber bullet guns. And yeah, they can cause a lot of damage, but I would prefer that the officer have that weapon. And so just to reiterate, people think we hate police. No, there are members of police in Black Lives Matter. These police officers believe that police should be held accountable for their actions, that there should be accountability. And I think when most people think of Black Lives Matter, they think of, their friend that lives down the street that plays basketball with their kids. He's a cop. Yeah. They love that cop. And they think we're going against him. No, this is not about personal racism. This is about systemic racism and how Black people are mass incarcerated, given higher sentences for lesser crimes, profiled and killed by police. And so we want to hold police accountable, and everyone should want police held accountable for their actions.
I want to explore some of that racism that we all have, even if we don't, for a moment. First, I'm talking to Lex Scott, the founder of Black Lives Matter Utah, on the podcast. City Council in Salt Lake City has passed this Commission on Racial Equality and Policing. Now, from my standpoint, when somebody creates a commission or a blue ribbon committee or whatever they do, they kind of think they've already done what needs to be done by simply creating the commission. I'm a little cynical about that. What's your feeling?
Well, there are a lot of good people sitting on. Pastor Davis sits on the committee, Darlene McDonald, and it's beautiful. But they also said, hey, we will have a report for everyone in July 2021. And I said, people are dying. Police brutality is still happening. There are race riots. We need change right now. So, I don't want to put them down because we haven't seen their work yet.
No, that was me that did that, not you. Go ahead.
I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. I always have high hopes. Now, my high hopes are often shot down. Yeah. But the cool thing is we have a lot of police reform legislation that is hitting the Capitol in January. So I'm very excited about that. There are no words to describe how hard Black Lives Matter has worked for 7 years. And we've been ignored. And finally, we have this chance at getting police reform passed. And I would urge people, hey, if you're sick of seeing protests, if you're sick of all the drama, there's an easy way to make Black Lives Matter go away. Give us racial inequality. Give us reform. There's the notion of violence. There are so many people who say, and they've said this throughout the years, throughout the 60s and 70s in Los Angeles and on and on. They say, violence, when these people, first of all, you're a nonviolent person. You're well known for that. And you also say that you've been ignored for a long time. And then all of a sudden, after all the protesting and everything, something gets burned down or somebody gets hurt, and all of a sudden we're paying attention. I know that people destroy their own neighborhoods sometimes and on, but and I'm not advocating violence, but somehow after a little, everybody protests, then we have a little violence, and all of a sudden everybody pays attention. What's your feeling on that? I think people started paying attention after George Floyd was killed. Okay. And then in Minneapolis, they had a lot of fires there. But I just want to make it clear that Black Lives Matter Utah, we have been going for 3 years now. I personally have been in this movement for 7 years, but the chapter has been around for 3 years. We've never had one arrest. We do not allow our members to incite violence or to destroy property. However, I like to ask people who see a building burning and get so mad, I like to say to them, hey, what bothers you more, watching that building burn or watching George Floyd be killed by police on film? Buildings can be rebuilt, okay? You can never bring back George Floyd, Darian Hunt, Tamir Rice, Patrick Harmon. So when people are more upset over property over lives, I have a problem with that. Martin Luther King said a riot was the language of the unheard. and even in the 60s, I went to New York City to the Schomburg Museum.
Yes.
And I saw the letters, the hate mail that were sent to Martin Luther King that said he was a race baiter and that he causes disruption and he was causing the rioting in the cities. People said the same thing about him that they say about us. Martin Luther King also blocked roads. He blocked the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
That's right.
Martin Luther King was arrested 30 times protesting against.
And by the way, the Pettus Bridge, that seemed to me to be a police riot, not a protester riot. That would just be but that's just an aside. Go ahead.
Exactly. And so, when we're asking for police reform, if people want us to go away, hey, give us police reform, give us racial inequality. I don't want to protest for the rest of my life. I've been protesting for 7 years. I would like police reform passed, and I'd like to move on to a different chapter of my life. I'd like to write a book. I'd like to, do other hobbies here. And we're sick of protesting, but we will continue to protest until police reform, lasting, meaningful police reform, is passed in this country.
And again, the way to do that is to make the police accountable to themselves. You're right. Almost all the police officers I've ever run into are good, kind, understanding people. They use their training. And I also, as a white guy, have been abused by police officers myself. So a little bit of general accountability would be a wonderful thing. That's what this is all about, isn't it?
It is. And a lot of white people, every interaction that they have with the police is positive. And because they have these positive interactions, they ignore Black people when we say, hey, all of our interactions with police are negative. Yeah. Well, I've never experienced that, so your experience doesn't matter. Our experience does matter. If you're a white person and you have had nothing but positive interactions and Black people say, hey, we're having negative interactions and you blame us for the interactions, you're the problem. Police are paid to protect and serve us. And another thing I want people to understand is that even if a person has a criminal record a mile long, that person deserves to make it to court. It is protect and serve, not comply or die. Police are not judge, jury, and executioner. And so people are like, well, this person was a criminal. Yes, guilty people deserve to make it to court. We continuously see white mass shooters making it to court and being captured alive, like Dylan Roof. The police not only captured him alive while he was armed, they took him to Burger King, and then they put a bulletproof vest on him because they were worried that someone might try to hurt him. Meanwhile, unarmed people like George Floyd are killed. Unarmed people are killed all the time. And another thing is people like Darian Hunt, he was open carrying a sword. He was cosplaying Afro Samurai. Utah is an open carry state. You can open carry an AR-15 and police are not allowed to stop you. But every time a Black person has a weapon on them, the media will say, oh, well, the police killed this guy. He owned a gun. Black people have the constitutional right to bear arms, just as white people do. And we also have the right of self-defense. So we need this narrative to stop about, hey, if this person wasn't committing crimes, they wouldn't have been killed. No, when people commit crimes, then they get to go to court. And a judge and a jury system decides the outcome.
Tell me about racism a little bit. And many of us don't think we're racist at all. Many of us have best friends. You are married, I understand, to a white guy, although I've never met either one of you in person. But all of these people, including me, can be racist. We don't like to think of ourselves that way. Tell me how we should be thinking or why we think the way we do.
Okay, every person is capable of racial insensitivity. Whether you have a Black friend, a Black wife, you adopted a Black kid, you grew up in a Black neighborhood, you are capable of committing a racially insensitive act because we all have implicit biases that are formed by the age of 5. I would encourage people to go to YouTube and look up the Anderson Cooper doll study. that proves that implicit biases are formed by the age of 5. And so when you do something, instead of saying, oh, I'm not racist, I have a black friend, or, oh, I'm not racist, I don't see color, because you need to see my color. That's an insult. Why would you not want to see my color? My color is beautiful.
Sure.
Instead of saying these things, say, oh, you know what? I didn't realize I was doing something racially insensitive. I apologize. And say, can you explain to me like how that was insensitive so I don't do it again? The majority of people are like, I'm not racist. Well, we're not saying that you are in the Ku Klux Klan.
No.
We're saying that you did something to offend us, and you need to have these hard conversations. People talking about race is extremely uncomfortable. A few years ago, Starbucks had a campaign called the Race Together campaign. And on that campaign, they encouraged baristas to talk about race and racial issues. And the world exploded in anger because people get angry when forced to talk about race. Every time Black people bring up race, people say, you're pulling the race card, instead of saying, hey, let me hear your experience. I didn't understand that's how you felt, or that's how that happened. People do not want to hear about it. They try to shut the conversation down. And that's why we still have racial issues. People say, if you stop talking about it, it'll go away.
No.
Well, if I went to the doctor and I had cancer and I said, hey, I have cancer, the doctor wouldn't say, don't talk about it.
No, that's like, I know, that's like COVID. As long as we quit testing for COVID, we won't have any more cases. Somebody says that, I forget who. Yeah, I understand. But how do you broach the subject? Because, you know, I have a prejudice against jerks, and that is my own personal prejudice. And when I see someone, man or woman, I probably judge them when I first look at them, the way they're dressed, possibly the color of their skin. And that's the color of that skin part that I would really rather eliminate, you know, from my biases, I think.
Well, I believe there's a study called the Entman study. And that study studied how the media portrays Black people versus white people in the media. Okay. And it showed that when a Black person is arrested, they'll often show them with handcuffs on. When a white person is arrested, they'll show them in a suit. It showed that they show Black people the majority of the time when they're talking about poverty and crime. And then white people the majority of the time when they're talking about wealth and success, instead of showing Black people who are wealthy and successful. And so I personally believe that our biases are formed by what we see in the media. And people need to say, hey, are Black people really that impoverished and poor, or do Black women have the highest graduation rate from college in the country right now in 2020?
I didn't know that.
You know, are Black people, according to Forbes magazine, Black entrepreneurs are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs in the country. And we also use cash more. So the majority of us, you know, the majority of movie theater sales are from Black people because we use cash typically. And so instead of saying, hey, you know, I think this about Black people, are we all uneducated, unintelligent criminals? Maybe do some research and say, hey, where does that stereotype come from? And then kind of do the research beside that, because we all have biases. I have biases. My husband, my white husband, will say things that are racially insensitive, and he has a Black wife. Yeah. And I have to say to him, hey, that's super offensive, and let me explain to you why that's offensive. And then he learns from that. It's the people that just don't want to hear it, that just stick their fingers in the air, la, 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 I don't talk about race, la, la, la. It's a left. It's a point of the left. You know, this is just the left trying to brainwash people. No, I'm a Black person. I'm the expert on my own lived experiences. I define what racism is against me and how I react to racism. And people, if they would listen to us, if this country would listen to Black and brown people, there would not be a Black Lives Matter movement. If people would have listened to us 7 years ago when we said, hey, police are profiling us and killing us. And instead of people saying, well, it's your fault. Yeah, I love the police. I love them. Instead of ignoring us, they could have listened. We could have had police reform 7 years ago, and we could have moved on with our lives by now.
All right. Let me go back to some of the demonstrations. And you've been to many of these in many of parts of the country. And in Salt Lake, I noticed that people were showing up with camo and armed to the teeth with these great big rifles, and they were counter demonstrators. How does that fit in to what you might talk about, when you're just having dinner?
Well, so we have a lot of white supremacist groups who are counter protesting us right now. The Proud Boys, the 3 Percenters, Utah County Citizens Alarm, Blue Lives Matter, etc. And they do come with AR-15s.
Yeah.
And a lot of weapons. And what that does is when we have a peaceful protest where we show up, I often tell people, leave the protest better than you found it. Pick up your litter, right? When you have a peaceful protest and there are these white supremacists there that are armed, it incites the crowd. It makes the crowd angry. It makes them tense. Some of them get scared. It just makes for a very uncomfortable situation. They also, but I want to make it known, they have the constitutional right to protest as well. Yeah. We all have the constitutional right to assemble, the constitutional right of freedom of speech. I personally do not believe hate speech should be protected by the Constitution. And that is what they're preaching. But, I'm not afraid of them. I'm on the right side of history, and they are not. And if they feel powerful with an AR-15, let them feel powerful with an AR-15. What a lot of people don't understand is I open carry a loaded semi-automatic 45 caliber weapon.
Open carry. So this is not concealed. You open carry this thing. So you're in the grocery store, and I got to see you carrying a sidearm. All right, go ahead.
I do. I open carry that everywhere I go because I get death threats every day of my life. I also have the constitutional right to bear arms. And the main reason why I carry it is because of cases like Darian Hunt, who had a sword and they blamed him for his death, and cases like Philando Castile, who had a legal gun and the officer said, "Let me see your license." He opened the glove compartment and the police officer shot and killed him anyway. Yeah. So I like to normalize Black people owning weapons so that people won't always be so quick to say, "Oh, that person owned a weapon, they deserve to be killed." No, Black people also have a constitutional right.
Well, absolutely. Now let's see. You're sick of protesting. Well, I don't know if that's the right way of putting it. Are you? Okay, you are sick of protesting, and you're ready to stop as soon as there's enough reform around for everybody. And your daughter is, I don't know, sounds to me like she's 7 or 8 years old. Soon she'll grow. Am I correct about that, sort of?
Well, my daughter is my daughter, and I try not to put her
No,
out
I'm
there.
talking about when she grows up, and you don't have to, feed her every day. She'll grow up and she'll move out and she'll get married and on and on. And then you want to get into some hobbies and some other stuff that you might like to do. And I wonder if one of those hobbies has to do with running for something, either locally or at the national level.
People ask me to run for office a lot, and I appreciate that. But
I know you're
just
probably like me. You just don't like to go to a lot of meetings, and that's what running. If you win, that's what you do, is go to a lot of meetings. Go ahead. Are you running for something someday? Maybe.
You know what? I just haven't thought of doing that. And everything that I do, I have to be passionate about it, or it's not done well. And I just don't feel. I mean, there is an office I've always wanted to run for, but I'm not qualified for.
What?
I've always wanted to run for district attorney.
And I have to be a lawyer.
I thought about going to law school and kind of running against Sim Gill, who is basically Lex Luthor to me. Okay, and I'm Superman. Okay.
Well, you have the right name. Go ahead.
Right. And so, I would like to run for district attorney if I was qualified. But at this point, I feel like running for office puts too many handcuffs on you. Right. And I'm kind of like I'm very raw. I'm raw.
That means that we're going to see you doing this for as long as we get to see you doing this, which might be the next 30 years or so, right?
No. What that means is there are 20 police reform bills on the Hill of the 2021 legislative session. Okay? If those pass, I plan to move out of Utah.
Okay.
I do. I plan to move away because I'm a public figure. I get recognized in grocery stores. I don't like the feeling of that. I don't like the feeling of being hunted by white supremacists. My family has agreed we can leave in January if these bills pass. If these bills don't pass, I will stay here for 30 years. We'll protest for 30 years until we get the police reforms. I would like to leave. I'd like to leave. I'd like to close it down. Let's go. And that depends on Utah. That depends on the elected officials. And if they want to be on the right side of history and they want to move on, because I've said this in a million interviews. Okay. 6 years ago, Eric Garner was choked to death on film by Daniel Pantaleo. Okay. Riots and protests erupted all across this country. And people were like, oh, we're going to get change. Nothing changed. 6 years later, George Floyd was choked to death on film. Okay. And if we don't get police reform right now, I promise you, in 3 years from now or 6 years from now, we will see another Black person who will be choked to death on film. Protests and riots will erupt. The national conversation will be at it again. It is Groundhog Day.
Right.
We are reliving the same thing over and over again. Give us police reform.
You know what? Here's the thing. We can't lose you, and here's why. Because you have an audience, like what, every week or every couple of weeks or whenever you feel like it, you've got the police chief of Salt Lake on speed dial, right? So how's that work?
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be helpful.
How does that help? Well, so Mike Brown is different than most police chiefs in this nation. He has always said he wants to hold his officers to a higher standard. He wants to improve his police department so it is the model for the nation. And we've been meeting with him for 4 years. And do we always get along? No. Do we always like each other? No. Sometimes we get in like yelling matches. Yeah, but do I believe that he's better than any other police chief in this nation? Correct.
Really?
Correct. This man, we asked for de-escalation training. He implemented 3 types of de-escalation training. We asked him for diversity training. He implemented diversity training. We asked him to put a complaint form on the website. He put a complaint form on the website. We asked for less than lethal weapons in police cars. He removed 70 lethal weapons from 70 police cars and replaced them with less than lethal shotguns. And the activist community likes to make fun of Lex and say, well, Lex is best friends with the chief of police.
Nothing wrong with that. If you're an activist, nothing wrong with that. Go ahead.
And we'll make out with that. No, there are a whole bunch of new activists on the scene who want to pretend they're more radical and revolutionary. And that's fine. Good for them. Do your thing. I hope you change lives. But my whole goal is to prevent police brutality from happening. And the only people that I care about making happy are police brutality victims. And that is who sit with me in those meetings with the chief of police. Police brutality victims. They come to the meeting.
You've made significant progress. Where don't you get along with Chief Brown? What is something? And maybe he needs to convince you of something.
Oh my God, there's so many times we don't get along. Like, for example, the Bernardo Palacios Carbajal case, he was shot while running away, and then Chief Brown goes on the news and he says, I back my officers who did this to that person. Well, it's just really insensitive because, someone is dead. That's a person who had a family who loved them and who cared about them, and it's upsetting because he will not fire police officers. It's very rare that if a police officer shoots and kills someone, that Chief Brown will fire them. Now, I've seen officers get fired for DUIs, and officers get fired for, leaving a canine in their vehicle to die. That's disgusting.
Well, they carry weapons. Sometimes it's going to be justified that a police officer shoots and kills someone. Is that true?
So there's a campaign called Campaign Zero. Okay. And in an ideal world, like if it was my ideal world, we met with the Salt Lake City SWAT team, And we believe that the Salt Lake City SWAT team has the best SWAT team in the United States of America. And why do we believe that? Because they don't shoot and kill people. People don't understand that. The SWAT team is the best SWAT team in America for de-escalating situations. What we want to see on the scene are police officers who don't come just to shoot to kill, who come to negotiate with people, who come and use tasers, who use rubber bullet guns, who try everything in their power to prevent the death of someone. And there's a campaign called Campaign Zero. Brittany Packnett is one of the activists who was one of the leaders in Ferguson, Missouri. And she sits on this Campaign Zero board. And their whole goal is 0 deaths. Anyone in America should agree. We want 0 deaths. And the narrative that, oh, all the suspects come out shooting and they come out shooting, they all have to be shot and
That's
killed.
right. No, well, split-second decisions. We hear about split-second decisions a lot, that type of thing. Go ahead.
I disagree that they are split-second decisions. Because I have been studying police reform for 7 years. I can tell you every person who was killed by police in Salt Lake and the exact situation that happened with that case. And they weren't split-second decisions. You had a long time to de-escalate that in the Dylan Taylor case, in the Patrick Harmon case, in the James Barker case, in the Sandrea Europe case. There are so many cases where the police say it's a split-second decision. No, you didn't de-escalate. You came in yelling and shooting. You didn't come in and say, hey, what's the situation here? That's why we push for so much de-escalation training, because we want to save lives. Because everyone listening to this, you see headlines about Dylan Taylor. Yes. And then it's a headline to you. I know his mom.
Okay.
She misses her son. These are humans, whether you hate them or not, because your blindness to blindly support police, no matter what, has blinded you that there are humans behind every case. And then people in the comments will say, well, what about police officers who are killed in the line of duty? Less than 200 police officers are killed in the line of duty per year. They count heart attacks and cancer in that count. There is not a war on police officers. No one wants to see police officers killed either. They have bulletproof vests, they have guns, they have a ton of weapons, they have MRAP.
And families, that's right.
Exactly. They have families as well. No one is out here. When police officers were killed in Dallas, Texas, we held a protest that same week. And I came out on stage and said, and this is in the Salt Lake Tribune, I came out and said, we don't shoot at police officers. I said that. And the chief of police thanked me for that, because that is not what we're trying to perpetuate here. What we're trying to perpetuate is an equal criminal justice system and policing system in this nation. And I promise you, Mr. Gephardt, I will not give up until I achieve that.
If you call me Mr. Gephardt, I'm going to call you Ms. Scott. How's that sound? This has been a fascinating discussion. I hope you'll come back to update us from time to time.
I appreciate you being there. And I hope that this got through to someone. If they have questions, they can go to blacklivesmatterutah.com. If they want updates about the chapter, they click on Join the Chapter. They'll get daily newsletters from us about initiatives, school supply drives. We have a summer camp for Black kids. We have a ski camp. And we have a lot of fun in the chapter. We rent out movie theaters for Black movies when they come out, like Black Panther. And so, yeah, if you want to join the chapter, or if you just want to email us with questions, you can go to blacklivesmatterutah.com and help us pass police reform. Email and call your senators, your congressmen, your representatives, and tell them, please pass police reform in the 2021 session.
Lex Scott, founder of Black Lives Matter Utah, thank you for joining us on the podcast. You're great. We'll talk to you again.
Thank you, Bill.
I'm talking to Adam Sessions now, and I wanted to invite him in here today because we are in a kind of a different time, kind of a crisis time, kind of a time when we're all a little bit more thankful maybe that we have the internet, and that's what One Wire specializes in. The fastest internet available and voice over internet telephone, VoIP, voice over internet communications. Adam, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Is that true? My assessment that things are changing?
They're changing very quickly from almost day to day, for sure.
Okay. And what are you doing about that? How's that affect you?
Well, it's certainly been a very interesting time. We've chatted previously about the fact that we've moved all of our employees home, and they're facilitating running our business on a day-to-day basis, which is communicating with our customers.
Yep.
And helping them make sure that their businesses are running smooth. And it's certainly not been without its challenges. There are days that I feel like we're certainly better at it than others. But it's,
you know what? You're not the only one working from home anymore. I mean, isn't that kind of what's happening? All these businesses, like mine, and I had a bunch of telephones for people all over the business, and now I've got a whole bunch of telephones spread out all over several counties, thanks to you, and we're working from home. Are you finding that to be the case? And is that a difficult thing to do?
Well, it's not as difficult as it may seem. A lot of people have actually made the transition to working from their PC, kind of like this. So their physical phone may still be at the office, and they're working from what's known as a web phone or a soft phone. We've seen that trajectory has really gone through the roof in terms of people adopting that technology, and then they're also baking in their phone app, and really they can start thinking about work really as more of a space that they exist in rather than a physical place.
And is this difficult? You talk computer language, and some people are busy plumbing all day, and some people are roofing all day and doing investments all day, and they don't have time, and they don't want to know everything there is to know about internet communication. So, I mean, do you guys come in and teach people about this stuff, or how does that work?
So absolutely, we're pretty hands-on. It's very much more of a boutique experience in terms of the setup and the configuration, and then the education process from a training perspective. Once the switch has been made, but believe it or not, it's very intuitive. So there's the vast majority of folks just kind of pick it up and understand that it's really designed to be picked up quite easily. And the process is generally speaking pretty easy to work with.
How pricey is this? I mean, where do you guys fall on the price spectrum, and how pricey is this to, I guess, have your company come in and change my office phones around, or for me to, and by the way, I can take my office phone and put it under my arm and bring it home and plug it in. Is that how pricey is that?
So you're absolutely correct. You can take that phone home, and it is mobile. It's actually when I compare against the traditional regional bell companies or the traditional phone lines, we're generally saving people anywhere from 20 to 25%. Now that can vary a little bit, but it's much more cost effective in terms of both the capital expense to acquire the product as well as the operational expense to run the product.
All right. And just by way of example, here's my office phone. I'm talking to you from my home now, but this is the phone that you installed that I put under my arm and just brought, to my home. So it's really as easy as that to do. And 20% less, you suppose. I know I'm paying a little less for my phone service.
Yeah, absolutely. What people don't always understand is that a phone line is really just a connection between you and the outside world. There's no features. There's really no functionality with it. You are forced to plug that into a phone system, a traditional phone system that might have the intelligence. Whereas now with voice over IP, all of the feature sets are baked into the cloud. So once you're accessing the internet, all of the voicemail to email, call recording, if you use something like that, all the reporting features that are there, the auto attendance, all the different things that you might use are in the cloud, and it's much, much more cost effective than simply buying a phone line from the traditional phone carriers.
All right, Adam Sessions, I want to talk to you again as we continue to move through these rather difficult times. You've moved me through nicely, and I appreciate you coming on here today.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Adam.
All right, joining us now on the podcast, a face some of you might be familiar with, some of you won't, but it's certainly a name you'll recognize. It's Jennifer Napier-Pearce. She's the former editor-in-chief of the Salt Lake Tribune, as well as a number of other things, that she's been doing, in our community. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Bill. It's such a pleasure to be with you today.
And I want to talk about the state of the news business. It seems we're in a transitional period between, it started off with newspapers and printing presses that printed, one sheet at a time, to printing presses that rolled tens of thousands of newspapers in a printing, and then we got television, and television boomed, and now television is waning, and newspapers are waning, and we're all getting this stuff, I guess, from the internet. What is the state, of news as far as you're concerned?
Well, I do think that the state of news is pretty strong. The state of local news is a little more precarious. I do think that this is sort of a transition point for where local news is funded. Newspapers, local newspapers, small news organizations across the country have really been struggling. And I think part of that is just the funding mechanism. You mentioned the internet. Internet ads do not pay the same as traditional print ads did. And so there's a struggle, there's a gap, a financial gap that needs to be filled for local newsrooms to survive and to thrive. And so, that's something that for the last couple of years, my team at the Salt Lake Tribune has been working on, is trying to figure out another path, because the old model was broken. It wasn't going to get fixed. Is there another way where we can generate revenue? And for us, that path included a nonprofit transition, the first in the nation to do it.
It is the first in the nation, and we're all watching very carefully on what the Trib is doing. How's that working?
So far, so good. I mean, there's a strategic plan in place. We definitely had some very ambitious goals. We put that forth to the community and said, look, here's what you get when you support the Salt Lake Tribune. And our readers have responded. Now, that doesn't mean that the Tribune is out of the woods.
That's
so
right.
I would say, the fundraising has to continue. The ongoing, evolving relationship with the community has to continue. But I feel like I left the Tribune in a very good place, and they're ready to soar.
If you say so, because I'm still very worried about the whole thing. I'm worried about the nonprofit model. I'm worried, we're supposed to be a totally independent press. People who would contribute to the nonprofit aspect of it, I guess they would have to agree to stay out of all editorial decisions that are made. And I worry about that. And I worry about not being, I didn't mind being a slave to subscribers or readers or viewers, and giving them what they not only want, but also what they need to know. And I just, when I first started Gephardt Daily, they did the Salt Lake magazine did a little story on us. And they said, what we should, one of the professors who was part of this article that I had nothing to do with, I just participated, as a subject. They said, what we ought to do is have citizen reporting, where citizens go out and report. And another professor came back and said, we already have that. It's called letters to the editor. The point is that we need to have the discipline that reporters have. We really are not supposed to take sides unless it's labeled editorial. And I worry about the fake, there's this fake news thing. There really is no fake news, is there?
Well, I don't like to call it fake news, because by definition, news has particular restrictions on it. To your point, I think that newspapers, news organizations need to make a value proposition to their communities and describe in detail how journalism is fundamentally different from other forms of communication. It's different from advertising. It's different from blogging. It's different. And those are all legitimate forms of communication, of course. But journalism has a very specific mission. It has ethics around it and a process. And when you talk about fake news, you've got millions, unlimited sources of news online right now and in other media. What you have to to tell the consumer is there's a difference in the sorts of news that I'm producing.
Yes.
So, okay, so we get a journalist gets a story tip. Is that published automatically? The answer is no. There has to be vetting, there has to be interviews, a lot of research, verification, all of that in the process. Now, they come up with a story. Is that published? The answer is no. It has to go through a whole editorial layer of review. So other people are sort of questioning and saying, does this headline work? Why did you choose this word?
Yes.
What about this source? Are they credible? And only then do you present it to the public as something that is fundamentally different from somebody's opinion. So I think that is the trick for
Yep.
local news and all news in particular in making the connection, saying this is something that is worth your time and your money. This is something that's worth supporting. And I think as journalists, we're not very good at describing the process.
No.
But that has to happen, Bill.
It's called discipline. It's called discipline, and we don't have to, unlike a plumber or a roofer or a contractor, or a doctor, we don't have to have a license to be a journalist. Specifically, anybody can be a journalist. Journalist in quotes, I suppose, in a way, but there really is a discipline. And I know that I have been assigned to cover stories, and I was not in philosophical alignment with whoever I was covering. And you know what? Nobody knew. And by the same token, I know of people who have been sanctioned or fired because they specifically took a side on a story that got published. There is really a discipline here, and I believe we discipline each other, don't we?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a give and take. As well as I do in a newsroom. We love gossip. Of course, we love gossip. We want to tell stories. We want to be on the inside. And that's just great. But there's always going to be some give and take in the news environment to say, why did you choose this way? Why did you even choose a specific word to describe this way? Is it biased? Can you describe the nuances more accurately? That kind of oversight has value to it. And that is where you have to make the connection with your community that, look, this is fundamentally different. It's important. It's been vetted. This is why we need you to help support it. Because local news, as you know, is not cheap. It's people. It's people fact-checking and fact-checking again and making sure that those checks and balances present as much accuracy as possible.
Here's the thing. With regard to bias, I don't think we're, as Ted Koppel once said, I don't think we're biased toward liberal or conservative. I think we're biased, if anything, towards sensational. It has to be a story that can be told. It has to be interesting, and on and on. I worry about the moniker of liberal bias. I think you could take you and me and 8 other people and put us in front of a burning building, and the fire trucks would be there and the ladders would be up, and maybe some firefighter has, rescuing someone has over their shoulder. And each one of us are supposed to tell that story. And we have, 200 words to tell that story. None of us would tell the story in the exact same way. And how do we differentiate? I think somehow that becomes liberal news, and it's really not, is it?
No, because everybody has biases. I don't care who you are. But at least journalists are trying to be self-aware enough to eliminate as much of that as possible out of the news product. Now, again, that's impossible. We're human. We all have feelings. And like you said, journalists typically are interviewing people, decision makers, policy makers that they may not personally believe.
That's right.
But that's part of the job, is to set aside whatever biases you might have and deliver what is impactful for the community. So it's really hard. You're absolutely right, though. When you have a room full of people, they are going to see different things at different times. I think we've seen this a lot in the coverage of local protests.
Oh, yes.
Some reporters will be here at point A, and you'll have another reporter at point B saying something quite different. And that doesn't mean they're false. It doesn't mean that they are not reporting what they're seeing. It just means that they have different perspectives and vantage points. And actually, that's a good thing. It's a good thing to have a variety of reports coming in. As a consumer, it makes it hard because you've got, information coming from every which way. At the end of the day, though, those accounts are going to align. I do think that journalists put their best foot forward, do the very best reporting that they can, and it's a sustained effort. So you can't really take one protest in isolation and say that this account was false for some reason because it differed from.
That's right. Since I came to town, I have heard that the Deseret News tends to be conservative and the Salt Lake Tribune tends to be liberal. And my argument for that, if that's true, is take a look at the editorial page. That's where you're supposed to, where columnists or whatever are supposed to absorb all of the day's news and all of the nuance around it and on, and write their opinion in the editorial page. But quite frankly, I have not seen any particular liberal or conservative bias on anything other than the editorial page. Would you agree with that?
Yes and no. I mean, I do think that historically, the newspapers had their own sensibilities, their own personalities.
That's right.
They were a reflection of the ownership, right? I think that both news organizations, and I can't speak for the Deseret News, but from observation, I would say that both have gravitated toward pragmatism and this idea that the editorial page really is the community's page. This is for voices, and it's a marketplace of ideas, and you can pick and choose what you want to see. Now, the editorial position of the editorial boards, again, this is sort of an educational process, but editorial boards represent the values of the institution. And I would say that there's significant differences between the Deseret News and the Salt Lake Tribune. But just very generally, the Salt Lake Tribune editorial positions tend toward pragmatism, tend toward, if there's a sense that it's a liberal newspaper,
yes,
because they're speaking out against the power structures that prevail. And in this state, where 90% of the state legislature belongs to a single religion and a single party, then that's the power structure that the Tribune is commenting upon, if that makes any sense.
It does.
And it's not just about church and state. It's also about, large industries. It's about, environmental protections, that kind of oversight. I mean, that's sort of the lens that the Tribune editorial board has traditionally looked through, is to comment on powerful institutions. And
I think people,
when you have a majority who's conservative, of course the counterpoint is going to be perceived as more liberal.
Sometimes people will criticize general journalism, I think, in my experience, by saying, well, you covered that story, but you didn't cover this story. And I go, well, we only do stories on the airplanes that crash, not the ones that land safely. It's an old moniker that's been around for, I think, a long time. And we don't follow every single person around every single day and write about every single thing they do. In my opinion, it has to be aberrant from the norm, or it has to be interesting. That is what makes a story. If it's not interesting to somebody, then it's probably not a story. Am I being a little too broad with that?
No, of course. And in my 20 plus years as a journalist, there's always that familiar complaint, Bill, right? You don't do enough good news stories. You don't tell enough good news. Well, the fact is that nobody reads the good news. I mean, that's the sad reality. We are drawn to conflict. We are drawn as human beings to a good story. And that's just our human impulse. I can't change that. Now, that's not to say that there aren't good stories out there that should be told. Absolutely. There are solutions that deserve extra attention. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying as a whole, we are drawn to drama. We are drawn to conflict, and that is sort of the basis of sports. It's the basis of theater, and it's also the basis of storytelling, is to find the tensions. I think that the distinction, though, for journalists is this extra responsibility to the community, that we are pointing out issues that deserve to be solved, problems that need your attention as an involved citizen of this community. So the perception is there.
No.
I don't have to agree with it, but I understand it.
Yeah, I know. My opinion is that we do all kinds of good news, and you just can't remember it. I used to give speech. I was down in Los Angeles forever, and when somebody asked me to give a speech about the news media, I would take that day's Los Angeles Times, and with my scissors, I'd cut out good news, neutral news, and bad news. And the good news side always was a much bigger pile. Now, the neutral news, and whether you consider this individually as good news or bad news, that's debatable. But the clear, somebody gave $1 million to the Boy Scouts or something, that's clearly in the good news pile. There's a lot, that good news pile is much bigger. To make your point, I just don't think you can remember it.
Yeah.
The good news.
Well, it's a matter of attention, but also, if there is a problem that needs to be solved, then as media, we should not turn a blind eye to that. We should enhance the conversation around that problem so that it holds leaders accountable, people that we've elected, that it empowers the community to have their say. I mean, I just think that there's sometimes we forget the function that the Fourth Estate plays in our democracy.
Yeah.
It is a give and take. We need to tell each other what is happening. We are a reflection of the community. And also, we need to make sure that the people who we've elected are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
That's right. Yeah. Let me change the subject here a little bit. Speaking of good news, that women's mural that they're putting up in downtown Salt Lake?
Yeah.
You are part of that thing.
I know.
As an influential woman, what do you think about it? What's the genesis of that?
It was a bit of a surprise. One of the artists, Jann Haworth, and she reached out to me several months ago and said, I'd like to include you on this mural. I didn't think anything of it. She asked me for a photo, and that was it. And then months passed, and I didn't think anything of it until this weekend. And she wrote me a note. She said, "Hey, just so you know, it's almost done. You should go check it out." So I went down there. They have me in newsprint pants, which I absolutely love. And then the shoes were designed by a local artist who I guess works with a designer Italian shoemaker in Italy. And I could never pull off those 4-inch heels, but I'm absolutely thrilled that he thought that I could. And there's so many women who are influential in this community. Drawing attention to them and being included as part of that group is just a pure honor.
Women have made a lot of progress, but we're not quite there yet, are we?
No, sadly. There are a lot of companies who now say that they want more women in the C-suite. They want more women on their boards. And I think that's all a good thing. But the sad reality is that women just do not get to the top very naturally. Usually you need an advocate. You need somebody who's pushing you to run for office. Women are still just a tiny fraction of our elected officials. I think we see more change on the grassroots level, which is terrific. But, there's not one woman who holds statewide office. There's not one woman who is in our congressional delegation. And women are essential to leadership styles, to progress. I think we have a ways to go in this state.
There's no question about it. I have never had a particular problem with women in the workplace, and I got this from third grade when Amy Wohl was better than me at math by far and was tutoring me along. And I came up under this culture in the 50s where, there was a certain role for women and a certain role for men. And those things are changing. And I've never particularly had a problem with any of that. And I really have never understood why equal pay for equal work has ever been under discussion, quite frankly. But that's just me being stupid, I guess.
No, not at all. I mean, honestly, I think that sometimes people aren't aware. Now we have a heightened awareness of this pay gap. I think that now more than ever, there's an obligation to make sure that there is pay parity, to make sure that that wage gap does close. It's such a problem here in Utah when so many women are in the workforce and they're not getting paid what a man is getting paid for the same job.
No.
And, representation matters. Seeing women at the top does matter. So
Yes, it does.
a project like the mural, it's pretty cool.
It is.
Just to see the range of voices, women of influence. And I hope that other, the generations to follow will be even feel more empowered to make contributions to our society.
Tell me where that's located so that we can have people run by and take a look. It has not yet had a grand opening, or whatever they call it, unveiling, I guess.
Yeah.
It's about to, but it doesn't matter. It's up and it's there. Where is that?
It's between Main Street and West Temple, right on First South. And I think, I want to say there are 6 different panels, 250 women, both historic, historic times as well as contemporaneous. And I'm just so honored and privileged to be part of that group.
Oh, I think you deserve every bit of it, to have your little tiny spot up there with your high heels and your newsprint. I think that's great. Let me go back to news for a second here before I let you go.
Okay.
I started, you wanted to be a doctor for a while, according to your bio and some other stuff. I started publishing news when I was 10 years old with the Lens. Yeah, it was the Lens Springs Weekly Press, and there were 200 or 300 homes in the this area near Buffalo, New York, called Lens Springs, and we went around and we got news stories. And I found out we charged 3 cents per ditto sheet. It was a ditto sheet. You remember Ditto Man? You could smell them and you'd get high because you were smelling alcohol or whatever. And so we had 2 columns with 3 or 4 stories. We ran around and got the news, wrote a paragraph or so, because you can't write much since you're typing all that stuff. Wrote a paragraph or 2 about whatever the story was. Most people gave us a nickel. Some people gave us a quarter, and we were in heaven when they gave us a quarter. We went around collecting. But I learned about First Amendment because there was a woman named Harrison. Mrs. Harrison was pregnant with her 4th, and Mrs. Harrison told us about that and that she was very proud. And when we published, Mr. Harrison, who was a lawyer, was very angry and came down and went nose to nose with my father, who actually knew something about First Amendment. And they were nose to nose, just a little neighborhood fight. But we published things. There was nothing untrue about it. It's just that he objected. And I stood there in the corner as a 10 or 11-year-old. We published for 2 or 3 years. But I learned about that. Just because you don't like the news doesn't make it news.
That's exactly right. Sometimes people forget that and they want to shoot the messenger, right? Because they didn't want their name in lights, or they didn't want their photo in the newspaper. And I understand that.
Yeah.
But there is a First Amendment here in the Constitution. Is guaranteed freedom of the press, and just like freedom of assembly and freedom of religion is right up there. And I just think it's fundamental. Again, the founders understood that if we were going to self-govern, we absolutely needed the freedom of expression. We needed something that would tell us the bad news as well as the good, so that we could make informed decisions as voters. So
what's the future of all this? Because we got to pay for it. What is the future of all this? What are we going to do if we don't know locally what's going on in city council? They could rob us blind.
Yeah.
If they don't know about the really boring story about the $5 million sewer project, where'd that money go? Did it really need to be $5 million? Who's going to investigate any of this local stuff if it's not for us, the news people?
That's why I say I do think that local news is at a crossroads right now. They've got to figure out a financially viable way forward. Newspapers are disappearing across the country by the hundreds.
Yes.
I think in the last 15 years, at least 2,000 newspapers have gone out of business. And that means nobody's looking to see what's happening at the county council. Nobody's looking at the school board to make sure that there's financial responsibility.
Oh, that's right.
So, I do feel very strongly that local news needs to figure out a financial way forward. That's why this nonprofit model, I hope it works. I'm cheering for the Tribune and other nonprofit news organizations. And again, the consumer is the piece. The consumer.
Let me clarify about that 2,000 newspapers. We're not talking necessarily about the big papers that you're familiar with, the Denver Post and the Salt Lake Tribune. The Los Angeles Times is pared down to a fraction of what it used to be, as is the Salt Lake Tribune and the D-News and all the rest of them. But we're talking about, the Pasadena Herald and, the Glendale Advertiser, which actually had news stories in there that was keeping an eye on stuff. Those are the ones you're talking about when you're talking about thousands going out of business and more every day.
Well, think about it. I mean, who's going to sit through a 4-hour school board meeting if it's not for the hometown newspaper reporter?
Yep.
Not many people are willing to do that on their free time. That's just the reality. Everybody has to live their lives. So if it's somebody's job, then you know that they care about it. You know that they're obligated to tell the story. I just think fewer reporters is really bad for communities, and so we have to figure out a way to make sure that reporters can have a living and provide that community service.
And finally, the question that I knew that I'm going to ask is, what are you going to do now? Are you going to run for something? What are you going to do?
No, I can't even imagine getting into the political arena. I'm not sure, Bill. I'm excited for the possibilities. I've got some feelers out there, so we'll see. I do love news. I love community engagement. I love that we are citizens with certain obligations, responsibilities, and powers, and we can make a difference. So wherever I end up, I'm committed to doing something that I feel very passionately about.
Yes, well, I'm going to try to keep up with you. I have your phone number. I know where to reach you. Jennifer Napier-Pearce, former editor-in-chief at the Salt Lake Tribune. Thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Bill. Take care.
You bet.
Okay, I wanted to talk to a fella named Chad Stokes. That's the guy you see right now on your screen. He is one of the owners of ES Solar, and I wanted to talk to him because it's a sunny day today, and my solar plant on my roof is making energy, and it was installed by ES Solar. And I wanted to talk to Chad about some of this because for me, it is a no-cost operation. So it costs thousands of dollars to put those solar panels up there, but the payment on that, and I used to pay the electric company about $300 a month. Now I'm paying them about, I think, $20 a month or something. There's a hookup fee and whatever. Anyway, it's great. I wanted to talk to you about that. Hi, Chad.
Hello, Bill. How are you doing this morning?
Good. I think you have a unique business model. You, unlike other solar companies I've seen, you go from cradle to grave to take accountability and responsibility for everything from the first knock on the door in sales all the way through to installation with your qualified licensed installers, all the way to a 25-year warranty. And I think that's unique. Is that unique?
It is. It is. It's something we're really proud of that we've been able to build. We would refer to ourselves as a true solar electric contractor. And Bill, you hit it right on the head. From knocking on someone's door and generating that lead, starting that relationship, all the way to the very end when the system's installed, the system's been commissioned, turned on, and even set up with monitoring and assistance with the tax credits and incentives that are out there. We take care of all of that. And then beyond, should anything happen to their system, it needs service or maintenance, we're there for them for those items as well.
After my system was installed back earlier this year, all of a sudden, a month later, some ES Solar people showed up at my door and they wanted to go on the roof because you detected that there was something wrong with my plant, with my solar system. So what do? Watch this stuff from your office?
We do. And that makes me really happy to hear. We have full-time monitoring. So we've, created a department within ES Solar that does the monitoring as well as set our customers up with monitoring. So our goal is always to detect something like that, Bill, before our customers might even, so that we can quickly dispatch one of our service techs and go out and take care of that, because we know how important it is that our systems are working all of the time and producing power for our customers so they get exactly what they paid for.
Okay, I'm worried about something, and it's a net metering situation, and I hear that there's going to be a change in net metering. First of all, explain what that is. My meter spins this way, and then it goes this way when I'm making power, and this way when I'm not making power. But the net metering charges are going to change. What's that all about?
Well, so there's a lot of speculation. What I do know, we've been in the industry for a very long time, and back November of 2017, we saw a change in net metering. It went from a true 1-to-1 credit. You produced a kilowatt hour of power, you got a kilowatt hour of credit back. November of 2017, that changed, and it's now about a 93% credit you get back for your solar power production. This fall, there's going to be another change. Nobody knows exactly what it is. I would suspect it won't be as favorable as the current net metering agreement.
Am I going to be okay? Am I going to be okay?
You are.
You
Great question, and we get that very often. You are grandfathered, Bill.
Oh, good.
And it's for a period of 15 years. Now, here's what's great. If the net metering stays the same, or maybe even improved, which I highly doubt that Rocky Mountain Power is going to improve on that net metering for solar customers, you would have the option to take the new agreement, or you would be grandfathered for the next 15 years.
All right. In order to make my solar plant and my electricity basically free compared to what it used to be, as time goes on, but that was because I got like $10,000 worth of tax credits out of this thing. How long are they going to keep that up?
Yeah. So, early in my career, there was a 30% tax credit. And just this year, the federal tax credit went down to 26%. So that's what everybody is getting back from the IRS by going green, by putting solar on their home. And then the state is giving $1,600. Now it's just a flat $1,600. Next year, that is dropping by 4%. So next year, families going solar are going to get a 22% tax credit, and the state incentive is going to drop $400. So it will be just $1,200. So there are some changes coming that it definitely will affect our industry, and I think that's why you're seeing so many homes with solar going up so many families with solar going up on their home, is because they're taking advantage of the opportunity this year to get the full 26% from the federal government and the $1,600 from the state.
All right, essolar.com. Is that how we reach you?
essolar.com. That's correct.
And I'm okay because I've been under the wire, but I guess to be certain, between the net metering possible changes and the tax changes, try to get this stuff done before the end of the year, I guess, right?
Absolutely. I don't think we've ever been busier as a company. I have 5 install crews out, doing each 2 jobs a day. In fact, if I could brag for just a moment, we installed as a company, Bill, last month, we had a goal of a megawatt in May, which is 1,000 kilowatts of power that we installed on homes for families in Utah. So that's pretty significant. We'll do that again in June, I believe, and probably each month throughout the year. And it's because of these changes that are coming, and families are understanding as they become more and more educated that if they're ever going to do solar, now is the time to take advantage of what we have available.
Chad Stokes at ES Solar. I not only sold, I bought. I highly recommend you guys. I really do. You're Gephardt approved, and I want to talk more about this in the weeks to come. I hope you'll come back.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Please tell Carol I said hi.
I will. Chad Stokes with ES Solar. Thanks for joining us.
I want to welcome to the podcast now somebody who you might not know her face, but you certainly know some of her work. It's Jann Haworth. She's the former artist in residence in Salt Lake City, and you have a new mural, Jann, that I took a look at a little while ago, and it's, what is it called? Women 2020?
It's called Utah Women 2020.
Utah Women 2020. And what, I mean, I stared at it for a long time. what, hundreds of women on that caricatures of women up there?
Yeah, there's about over 260 portraits done using the stencil graffiti process. So yeah.
And I know that we're supposed to interpret art, but why don't you help me with that? What's the inspiration, and what are you trying to say with this?
Well, I think the moment is obviously a very large one for this country. The fact that we are celebrating 100 years of women voting is one point. It's a centenary of the 19th Amendment that gave voting rights to women. And things like that are obviously worth analysis in that not every woman got the vote. So there's some work to do and thoughts to put with that. But it's also 100 years since the last pandemic ended. 1918 to 1920 was the other pandemic. And I think that's worth paying attention to as a centenary as part of this mural too. So the original idea was Scott Anderson's at Zions Bank. He wanted to make have us do a mural. My partner Alex Johnston and I worked together on this, and the idea was that the mural would celebrate the ratification of women's voting rights.
All right. First of all,
the pandemic coming.
No. What is it? 2 stories high. First of all, it's located at 37. That's 037, 37 West and 100 South. And that's on the side of the, a 4-story Zions Bank building. And that thing's got to be 3 or 4 stories, just the mural itself, isn't it?
It's 7 stories.
Oh, 7 stories. All right.
So the mural itself is 5. It's 90 foot wide by 55 foot high. So just under 5,000 square feet.
Who is on that? Who's on that mural? Yes, it's huge. It's wonderful. Who's on that?
Well, Logan Tom, the Olympic volleyball player, woman is on there. Bettina Black, a woman activist and lawyer. Who else?
Who's in the airplane on the right-hand side, upper right-hand side? Who's in the airplane up there?
That's Edie Roberson. She is one of Utah's most outstanding painters. She is deceased now. She used to do wonderful paintings of things like tricycles and tin cars and tin airplanes in the sky. And I really wanted to draw attention to her work. And so I did the image of Edie in the airplane. She has a scarf that's kind of trailing back.
Yes, she does.
But is it art?
Of course it is. It's wonderful. It's definitely worth going down to see. It's hard to say it's not been unveiled because there's nothing over it, and I looked at it, but it has not been announced at this point, has it?
No. The bank wanted to wait till Wednesday, which was the actual final moment of the.
That's the 26th of August. Yes,
that's right, the 26th of August. And so officially, we're still holding back the image, and it'll go kind of live at that time. And between 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock, the bank has arranged for people to be able to drive through and out the other side of the parking lot, and they'll be given a key to say who everybody in the mural is. And because the parking lot is a parking lot,
oh, good. You'll have a key. Well, I recognized a few of them up there. I thought our current mayor, Aaron Mendenhall, I think, and there's Jenny Wilson.
That's right.
And let's see, Jackie Biskupski is up there, former mayor of Salt Lake.
Diane Stewart and Geraldine Dreyfus and Mary Maloof and Julie Jensen, playwright, Amy Redford. Yeah, it's a good mirror. It's the front rows are the first thing you see, and then as you work your way up, you see this whole. No.
What is the medium? You briefly described it as graffiti something. What is the medium that you use?
Well, there's a process that has several titles, but it's a very old process where you take any image, a bird or a decorative pattern, and in a piece of paper or in a piece of cardboard, you cut a shape. In this case, we gave photographs to people all across the state And what they did is that they cut the image. And what you do is you cut the dark shapes within the photograph. And the magical thing is that it makes a really perfect portrait. That's not to say that style doesn't come into it, because each person handles that differently. But for sure, it allows a novice artist or someone who has never been trained in art to make a recognizable portrait. And so here we have 178 people who have contributed to this particular mural, doing one or more heads for the mural itself.
It looks very much like the 1967 Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band cover, which you designed and made. I don't know if anybody knows that. You're among us, and you're a big celebrity who nobody knows, I think. But well, it does look a lot like that, doesn't it? And was it designed
the thought behind it really goes back to 2004 when I must make mention too here that I am a co-designer of that album.
Okay.
Peter Blake and I did that together. In 2004, I wanted to revisit the cover because Sgt. Pepper came up as the #1 album of all time on a Rolling Stones survey. And I felt that the cover had faults, and I thought it was time to redress that. So the SLC Pepper Mural, which is over on 400 West, was an attempt to...
400 West
and between 200 South and 300 South.
Yes, I've seen that many times, and just so we know where that is. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, it had 12 women on the original Sgt. Pepper cover, which I thought was pretty poor. The ethnic diversity was likewise very poor. So the SLC Pepper was an attempt to really revise that and look at it again through the lens of time, and to say that we could do better. And so that mural has 50% women. It has greater ethnic diversity, and I was looking at that in 2004 as an issue that we needed to pay attention to. Then more recently, we've done using the same kind of crowd technique, one called Work in Progress, which is an international women's mural. So this is a grandchild, if you like.
Yeah, oh yes. As I drove away, I drove up to 5th South, and I turned right to get onto the freeway, and I just thought of somebody else that was up there, which is, I drove by the clinic for homeless people and poor people, and there's Pam Atkinson's name right on there, and she's on the mural as well. A very famous, a very giving woman in our community.
Yes, and Pamela is British, and I thought it fitting that a British woman would do the portrait of her. Laura Leach did that portrait. She works for Wasatch Community Gardens. And I think Pamela's image created by Laura is just magical. She did such a beautiful job. And it does have, it sits at a point where realism and a portrait of somebody's spirit is reached for. And
you can't, that's, you bring that up, you can't look at this thing for 5 minutes. You have to spend, I think, several hours because how many artists were involved in this again?
178.
And you have to look at these things. You have 178 pieces of art that are combined into one big piece of art.
There's 260 pieces of art.
Well, there you are. Okay. But and they're all different artists, so they're all different interpretations. And I don't know how you can. I next time I go down, I'm taking some of those tiny little binoculars, those opera glasses, so that I can see some of the art that's on that wall. And what worries me is weather. How is this? All of this effort and all of this work and all of this volunteerism and Zion's Bank and everything else. And is it going to survive the winter and the summer and the winter and the summer?
Well, yes, because we have a file that we can reproduce this on a smaller scale, and because its final form was digital in this case, it can go to any scale. So yes, it will survive because it can be replaced. The other part of that is that in my dreams,
yes.
I would to find a new building that we can actually install the actual artwork as a collage. The actual artwork is life size. So if we can find a public building that we can do something like a WPA project and get that mural up there, then it could have a permanent place as an art object, either on panels or on a wall or something of that sort. And I think, you almost touched on a point that I think is important to mention, that women still struggle with images of themselves, and you look at a photograph and maybe 1 in 100 pleases you. Here we've leapt into a snake pit of possibilities of people being displeased with their images. And I think, what we have to put here is that an artist or a non-artist came face to face with an image she chose or he chose to make this image of this particular person. They chose the person that they did. And whether that comes from a place that is a very simple interpretation or a very complex one, each of these portraits has this kind of spirit of giving in it. And I'm so thrilled with, for example, a woman in England who is doing triage work with people who have lost someone to the COVID horrible virus. And she's advising people on the phone all day long, and then came home to cut the stencil of Pat Jones. And all the while her daughter is fighting for a pregnancy, nearly losing a baby, and we put the baby on the mural. So all of these things are welded together like a friendship quilt. And so it has that spirit in it too.
Can I get this next time I go down there? The grand opening, or other times when I want to be maybe without a crowd so I can look at the thing for a while. Is it called a guide? Is that what you called that you'll give me to? Yeah. Where can I get one of those online? I mean, you'll probably be handing them out, but yeah.
Yes, you will be able to. And between 11 and 1 on Wednesday in the drive-through, Zions Bank is going to be giving those out. So there'll be some there, but we will put on our website, and Zions Bank will have on their website a downloadable key so that you can print that and take it with you.
That's about the only way I could enjoy it. It's like going through an art gallery and seeing the entire art gallery at once. And that's hard to do. You have to go, from one sculpture or painting to the next.
And we want to know who the artist was that did all these different things too.
Indeed.
We've got to get all that on there as well. So it's a big key. The front row, I should make mention of the fact, is all local artists with the exception of 2. And all of that work, I think, shows so beautifully what Salt Lake has in the way of resources creatively. There are absolutely outstanding pieces in those full figure renditions of different women. I mean, if you look at Nathan Florence's Virginia Tanner or Trent Cull's Brittany Bowe just knocks it out of the ballpark. I mean, it is remarkable. And so I think there's a thrill waiting there too, to see what it is that makes Salt Lake at this point, or makes Utah altogether.
I am continually amazed by all of the things you find in Salt Lake if you dig deep enough, and that includes, especially in the art world. I think there's a lot of stuff in the performing arts and whatever the other arts are. I think it's all there. Well, Jann, it's a real pleasure to talk to you. Good luck there on the 26th when we get this going, and you can count me on probably being down there on the 26th, as well as going down there with my opera glasses and my guide so that I can, pay close attention to this in the future. So it's located at 37 West, 100 South. There are 2 big murals in there. So look for the one with all the women. It's Utah Women 2020. Jann Haworth is our guest, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Thanks, Jann.
Cheers.
All right, I'm talking to Brian Hendricks at Dream Dental Implants now. And the reason I wanted to talk to you today is because I have heard, now I don't have any implants, but I have heard that you can basically pull all the teeth out and put them all back in and do it in one day and it doesn't hurt. How can that be?
Yeah, well, it seems too good to be true, right?
Well,
to be able to pull your teeth.
Sometimes just to get something put on your teeth there, they put a temp in, you have to come back. That's not done in one day. I can't imagine doing a whole mouth in one day.
Well, that's the thing is that we've come a long ways in technology, and we've come a long ways in we've progressed so much that literally if it's well planned out, that's what my office does is we are able to make a smile happen all in one day. And like you said, most people coming in here either already are in a denture or they have teeth that are bad. And in literally a morning, I extract teeth, put implants, which are basically anchors into the bone, and then we hang a brand new smile in that day. And so it's a lot of work for me as a doctor, but it's life-changing and it's pretty fun.
Well, if I already have dentures, why do I want these what do you call them? Four, what are they? What is it?
All on four bridge.
All in four.
Yeah. So so someone that has dentures is someone that's had all their teeth extracted. And so the problems you have with a denture is that a denture is moving around your mouth all the time. It falls out, constantly has to be worked on and relined. The worst part is that, I don't know if it's the worst part. I don't personally have dentures, but I meet people every day that do. And I hear that they can only chew, 30% of the food they used to when they were younger. They can't taste their food because literally the denture, the big piece of plastic, it obstructs all of your senses, your ability to taste the food that you love. And so even if you could argue that the denture looks nice, so much of your lifestyle is restricted, and that's why people come and see me and are looking for something better, and that's why Dream Dental exists.
Yeah, Dream Dental Implants, I think, is the full name, isn't it?
Yes.
Not just Dream Dental. Okay, and this is done in a day, and what's the recovery for this?
Oh, typically patients will take a couple days off. I have some really, really crazy patients that I don't recommend this, but they'll go back to work right the next day. The truth is that you would think you'd be in a lot of pain, but because of my proprietary system and processes, we do a lot of work before the patient ever arrives in my office. I mean, we start them on certain medications, and we do things that really change the game as far as pain. And if they listen, which sometimes can be difficult, especially
that's because we're patients. That's right.
Yes, that's always the tricky thing. If they listen, then their experience is pretty unique. Usually, if you go to my Facebook or YouTube page, you'll see I interview patients a day after surgery, and usually they tell me they're 2, maybe 3 out of 10 as far as pain. And so you typically will have more pain on a single extraction than a process like this. So,
is that right? It sounds crazy expensive. I mean, dentures are pretty expensive as it is, and what you do sounds pretty crazy expensive.
Well, expensive is relative to the value that it gives, right? So for patients that come in, they seek me out because they've gotten to a point where they literally just do not want to continue to have the same experience. When you can't chew the food you love, when your smile is inhibiting all your important relationships in your work and your health. I mean, people typically come in and they say, "Gosh, I just wish I'd done this sooner."
I think I want to come down there and watch you do this one of these days. Can I come down with a mask and a gown on and get a patient's permission and watch you do that? I think I'd like to do that.
It would be an honor. It would be an honor to have you in.
Well, I'm going to do that. This is Brian Hendricks at Dream Dental Implants. They're located in downtown Salt Lake. And you said go to a Facebook page or a website. What is that?
Yeah, so dreamdentalimplants.com, or if you go to our Facebook page, Dream Dental Implant Center, Dream Dental Implants. And we have a YouTube page. A lot of people see me from all over the country and even internationally, and they watch my YouTube videos, which I spend a lot of time doing what we're doing right now, which is answering questions. And
well, you teach this stuff to other dentists, right?
Yes, yeah. I have doctors. So within my facility, it's 15,000 square feet. I have doctors coming in usually every 2 or 3 months to do some teaching with me. Right now, with the coronavirus, we haven't done that, but we're excited. We're looking to probably have some more doctors come in August. But yeah, I mean, I love to teach. It's my passion. My staff, they laugh that if I'm not teaching something, I'm not happy. And I think it's just I'm a giver by nature, and knowledge is, I think, the best thing to give. And when you can empower a doctor to go and change lives, then I think that's pretty special.
Well, you've taught me a few things, and I will come down there very soon as it's safe enough for you, and put on a mask and watch what you do. And I won't interrupt you and ask a lot of questions. I'll just watch, and I'll save my questions for later. And maybe whatever I see, we can put on this podcast sometime.
That would be amazing. I think that'd be awesome.
All right, Dr. Brian Hendricks, we will do it at Dream Dental Implants. Thanks so much for joining us. So there you go, the Bill Gephardt Show podcast. I told you it would be jam-packed with all of those exclusive interviews.
And we'll see you next time for more of the same.